The stars stretched into infinity, cold and indifferent. In the heart of the Amira system, where the battle for survival had raged for centuries, a new force emerged, one that had never been seen before. The Thunderclap appeared from hyperspace, a hulking metal giant, sleek and imposing, cutting through the silence of space like a blade. This was humanity's last stand. Captain Adrian Blackthorn stood at the bridge of the Thunderclap, the heart of the Terran fleet, his gaze fixed on the cold expanse of the cosmos. He was calm, his every movement calculated, yet his pulse raced with the weight of what was to come. The Terran forces had been operating in secrecy for years, building their strength in the shadows, biding their time. But now, the time had come to make their presence known. The Zr'vash, an empire that had enslaved countless species, crushed entire worlds under their boot, were about to face something they hadn't accounted for: humanity. "Captain, we're receiving a response from the Zr'vash fleet," Lieutenant Mira Albright's voice broke through the hum of the ship's machinery. She stood at her station, a mixture of determination and nervous energy in her stance. Mira was pragmatic, cautious in a way that balanced Adrian's aggressive nature. Where he was driven by a deep-rooted thirst for vengeance, she had always been the voice of reason, the one to ground him when his ambitions threatened to overtake him. Adrian nodded, stepping closer to the command console. "What's their count?" "4 capital ships." "The fleet's more scattered than we anticipated," Mira replied, her fingers moving swiftly across the control panel. "Their defenses are formidable, but I don't think they've noticed us yet." "Good. Let's keep it that way as long as we can." "All hands, prepare for engagement," Adrian said, his voice steady but tinged with an edge of excitement. This was it, the moment humanity would show the universe it would no longer cower in the shadows. A sharp beep sounded as the fleet's scanners picked up something unusual. The Zr'vash ships, having recognized the unfamiliar readings, were now on full alert. The Thunderclap had just made its first mistake: it was no longer invisible. Adrian turned to Mira, his jaw set in grim determination. "Are we ready?" "Systems are at full power. Weapons are primed, but..." Mira hesitated. "We've never fought the Zr'vash on this scale before. They're ruthless, and they won't give us a second chance." "We don't need a second chance," Adrian replied, his voice like steel. "We need to win." As the Zr'vash fleet adjusted its course, the tension on the bridge grew thick. The hum of the engines, the crackling energy flowing through the hull, it all felt too quiet. Too calm. "Target locked," said Commander Kai Richter, the ship's weapons officer. His fingers hovered over the firing controls, ready to unleash the wrath of humanity's might. "On my mark," Adrian ordered. He looked at the view screen, his eyes narrowing as the 4 Zr'vash ships came into full view. The creatures who had once seen humanity as nothing more than an insignificant speck in the cosmos were about to learn just how dangerous those specks could be. "Mark," Adrian said. The first salvo of energy blasts erupted from the Thunderclap, a violent eruption of light that tore through the blackness of space. The Zr'vash ships reacted instantly, their shields flaring with a violent, blinding glow, but the first wave of shots hit hard. Adrian watched, his heart racing, as the enemy shield shimmered under the strain. Then the return fire came. The Zr'vash had begun their assault, their ships launching pulse weapons and missiles toward the Thunderclap. The ship rocked under the first barrage, but the hull held firm. Adrian felt a shudder run through the deck plates beneath his boots, but he didn't flinch. The crew was prepared for this. They had trained for years to withstand this very moment. Mira's voice was calm but urgent. "Shields holding at 80%. Hull integrity is stable. Maintain fire," Adrian commanded. "We're not here to survive, we're here to win." The Thunderclap fired again, this time with a devastating accuracy that stunned the Zr'vash. One of their capital ships, a massive vessel bristling with weapons, shuddered violently as the blast hit its side. The Zr'vash ship returned fire, but Adrian anticipated their move. He had studied their tactics, their strengths, and their weaknesses. The Thunderclap danced between their shots, dodging and weaving with precision, a testament to human ingenuity and resourcefulness. "Direct hit on their flagship," Richter announced. The Zr'vash ship is taking damage. Adrian allowed himself a brief smile, but there was no time to savor the moment. The battle had only just begun. "They're regrouping," Mira said, her eyes scanning the readouts. "Expect more firepower incoming. They won't be so careless this time." The Zr'vash were formidable, yes, but they were not invincible. Humanity's defiance was a force they could never anticipate. Adrian knew that this battle, though only the first, would change everything. "We need to make them believe we're more than they can handle," Adrian said, his tone resolute. "We need to break their will." Another volley of Zr'vash fire hit the Thunderclap, shaking the ship once again. This time, however, the damage was minimal. The Thunderclap had been built to endure, and the crew had trained to fight back. They wouldn't just survive this battle, they would win. "We're almost through their defenses," Richter called out. "They're weakening." Adrian's eyes lit up with a renewed focus. This was the moment. Humanity was not just a footnote in the galaxy. They were a threat. They were a force that could turn the tide. "Keep pressing." "We finish this now," Adrian ordered. The Thunderclap roared forward, launching the final salvo that would cripple the Zr'vash flagship. The energy blast hit its mark with precision, sending the alien ship into a deadly spiral. Sparks erupted across the bridge, and a loud groan of metal echoed through the ship. "We've done it," Mira whispered, the tension finally breaking. "The Zr'vash flagship is going down." But Adrian's eyes were already on the next target. "No. We've only just begun." And so, humanity's fight for the galaxy had begun. The battle had shifted. The Thunderclap's initial assault had crippled the Zr'vash flagship, sending shockwaves through their fleet. For the first time in centuries, an alien race, humanity, had broken through their defenses. But as the battle raged on, Adrian Blackthorn knew this was just the beginning. The Zr'vash would not take defeat lightly. The stakes had been raised, and the enemy would retaliate with everything they had. "Captain, we're not alone anymore," Lieutenant Mira Albright's voice was sharp, tense, as she scanned the readouts on her console. The hum of the engines filled the room, but beneath it, the palpable sense of impending doom seemed to settle in the air like a thick fog. "Reinforcements are on their way. More Zr'vash ships, 3, maybe 4. They're angry." Adrian stepped forward, his eyes flicking to the tactical display. The Zr'vash fleet, though disarrayed by the initial strike, was quickly regathering, preparing for their retaliation. The alien warships had already begun to form a tight formation, their weapons glowing ominously. The Thunderclap had caused damage, but it was only a temporary setback. "We've got them on the ropes, but we can't afford to make mistakes now," Adrian muttered. He turned to Mira, who was already reading his thoughts. "Captain, we can't keep pushing forward with the same strategy," she warned. "They're adapting too quickly. We'll need a new plan." Adrian nodded, his face drawn tight with the weight of command. The Thunderclap was humanity's greatest weapon, but even it couldn't withstand an endless wave of Zr'vash firepower. He'd gambled everything on this first strike, but now they had to outthink their enemies. "Do we still have a functioning shield generator?" Adrian asked, his voice calm despite the urgency. "Yes, but the shields are at 65% power. We can't take another barrage like that," Mira replied, her hands flying over the console as she worked to stabilize their defenses. "We'll have to be strategic, or we'll lose the Thunderclap before we finish the job." A flash of light outside the viewport signaled the arrival of the Zr'vash reinforcements, 4 sleek ships, darker and more aggressive than the first wave. They were massive, their weapons pulsing with an unsettling red light. Adrian felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. This was the real fight. The Zr'vash were no longer toying with them. This was their retaliation, and it was going to be brutal. "We can't let them regroup," Adrian said, his tone now icy with resolve. "Helm, bring us around. Target their lead ship. Let's break their formation." "Aye, Captain," the voice of the helmsman echoed through the bridge, and the Thunderclap lurched as it spun into position. The crew moved swiftly, each person seamlessly executing their roles like a well-oiled machine. This wasn't just a ship, it was a symbol of humanity's resolve, their defiance in the face of annihilation. Firing, Commander Kai Richter announced. The ship's weapons vibrated as they discharged a concentrated burst of energy, slamming into the lead Zr'vash ship with a force that sent it veering off course. The alien vessel faltered, smoke billowing from its weakened hull. Direct hit! Richter shouted. They're retaliating with everything they've got. The Zr'vash fleet responded immediately. The remaining ships fired in unison, their weapons unleashing torrents of energy that rattled the Thunderclap. The ship groaned under the pressure, but it held together. Still, the crew felt the burn of the assault. The Zr'vash were relentless. "We need to push through," Adrian said, his voice unwavering. "Mira, I need you to calculate the next strike. We're going after their command ship, take it out, and the rest of their fleet will fall into chaos." Mira nodded, her mind working at lightning speed. Calculating trajectory, adjusting targeting systems. She spoke in a near monotone, her focus absolute. "We have a 20-second window. We need to hit them in the engine bay. If we destroy their propulsion, they'll lose coordination, and their fleet will scatter." "Do it," Adrian commanded. The Thunderclap fired again, but this time, the Zr'vash had anticipated the move. The enemy ship's shields flared up, absorbing most of the blast. But the Thunderclap was faster, more agile than the Zr'vash had calculated. The Terran ship shifted course again, weaving between enemy fire like a serpent in the dark. "Shields at 50%, Mira called out, her voice tight. "Hull integrity holding, but we can't take much more." Adrian's eyes locked on the viewport, watching as the Zr'vash fleet regrouped, their ships beginning to close in for a final strike. It was now or never. "Commander Richter, get ready to fire everything we've got on my command," Adrian ordered. "Aye, Captain." The countdown began in Adrian's mind. The Zr'vash were closing in, preparing for a coordinated attack. The gap was narrowing. The Thunderclap could barely keep up with the incoming barrage of energy beams. But Adrian had one final trick up his sleeve. "Now!" Adrian barked. The Thunderclap unleashed its full arsenal in a single, devastating blast. A wave of energy surged forward, hitting the lead Zr'vash ship square in the engine core. The blast tore through its shields, ruptured the hull, and sent the ship spiraling into the void. Its lights flickered once, then went dark. The remaining Zr'vash ships hesitated, just for a moment. That moment was enough. "Target the next ship," Adrian shouted. "Keep up the pressure." Myra's fingers flew over the console, quickly recalibrating the weapons systems. The Thunderclap moved forward, focusing fire on the second Zr'vash ship. This time, there was no hesitation in their movements. The Zr'vash were reeling, their fleet no longer a cohesive unit. Adrian's voice was steady but filled with determination. "We've done it. We've broken them." But even as he spoke, he knew this wasn't over. The Zr'vash were wounded, but they were far from finished. Adrian's mind raced. There was still more to come, and they couldn't let their guard down, not yet. As the Thunderclap floated in the vast emptiness of space, surrounded by the debris of the first battle, Adrian couldn't help but feel a fleeting sense of hope. They had stood against the most powerful empire in the galaxy, and for the first time in centuries, humanity had not just survived, they had fought back. But there was no time to celebrate. The real war was only just beginning. The cold silence of space was punctuated only by the hum of the Thunderclap's engines and the occasional beep of the console. Adrian Blackthorn stood at the helm, eyes scanning the debris of the battle. The Zr'vash fleet had been severely crippled, but they had not yet yielded. The enemy had retreated momentarily, regrouping at the edge of the Amira system, and Adrian knew they would be back, stronger, more determined, and angrier than before. The Terran fleet had dealt a blow, but the war was far from over. "Captain, we've sustained heavy damage," Mira Albright's voice broke the stillness, her words laced with a strain she didn't attempt to hide. "Shields are down to 40%. We've got critical systems failing. Hull integrity is holding, but I can't guarantee how much longer." Adrian clenched his fists, his face hardening. They were in the lion's den now, and there was no turning back. The Thunderclap had survived the first wave, but he knew that the Zr'vash would not let them escape without a final confrontation. This battle had sparked something in the heart of humanity, a thirst for vengeance, for survival, for a future free from tyranny. "We've come too far to turn back now," Adrian said, his voice unwavering. "We've shown them we're not just pests to crush underfoot. Let's finish this." Mira gave a curt nod, though her eyes betrayed the doubt that lingered in her mind. She had seen the Thunderclap take the hits, and it had been close. Too close. Adrian's mind was already moving ahead, strategizing their next move. "Commander Richter, have we located their flagship?" "We've got a lock on their command ship," Richter's voice responded quickly. "It's heavily protected, but if we get in close enough, we can take it down. We're down to 30% of our primary weapon power, though." "Then we'll make it count," Adrian replied. "Prepare to launch a full assault. Let's break them apart one ship at a time." The Thunderclap had the advantage of speed, agility, and an unpredictable fighting style. Unlike the Zr'vash, who relied on sheer firepower and brute force, humanity's ship was designed to outmaneuver and outthink. The key was precision, timing, and exploiting every weakness. The tactical map on the screen flashed with new data. The Zr'vash were forming up again. Their ships, though battered, had reassembled and were now circling their flagship like vultures, waiting for the right moment to strike. It was the calm before the storm. "We're going in," Adrian said, his voice cutting through the tension. "All hands, brace for combat." The Thunderclap surged forward, its engines roaring to life, the ship's formidable presence challenging the Zr'vash to act. The crew moved swiftly, working in perfect harmony, each person focused on their task. There was no room for hesitation, no time for second-guessing. This was their moment. "Full power to forward shields," Mira commanded, her fingers flying over the console. "Let's keep their fire focused on us, Captain. We'll draw them in." Adrian's mind sharpened, his instincts taking over. "Let them come. We'll be ready." The first wave of Zr'vash fire erupted from their fleet, a massive barrage of energy beams and missiles. The Thunderclap shook under the impact, but its shields absorbed the brunt of the assault. The ship veered, twisting through the deadly flurry of weapons with a fluid grace that left the Zr'vash momentarily confused. "Captain, we've got a clear shot at their flagship," Richter's voice rang out over the comms. "I'm ready to fire." "Do it," Adrian ordered. The Thunderclap's cannons fired in quick succession, the bolts of energy slamming into the Zr'vash flagship's shields. For a moment, it seemed as if the ship might hold, until a second volley, more precise and deadly, found a weakness in the enemy's defense. A ripple of sparks exploded across the flagship's surface as their shields began to falter. The Zr'vash had underestimated the Terran's resolve. "Direct hit on their command center," Richter announced, his voice almost lost beneath the roar of the ship's weapons. "Target their engines next." "We need them dead in the water," Adrian said, his voice calm despite the rising chaos. As the Thunderclap moved in for another strike, the Zr'vash flagship retaliated with a devastating counterattack. This time, they aimed directly at the Thunderclap's hull. The ship rocked violently, alarms blaring throughout the bridge. The front viewport cracked under the intensity of the blast, but the Thunderclap held firm, its reinforced armor holding out long enough for them to close the distance. "We're almost there," Mira said, her voice tense but focused. "Just a little longer." Adrian's knuckles whitened as he gripped the armrests of his chair. His eyes never left the battlefield. This wasn't just about winning, it was about sending a message. Humanity had been enslaved, hunted, and suppressed for too long. Now, they were fighting back. "Now, Commander." Adrian commanded. The Thunderclap unleashed everything it had in a single, all-consuming strike. The concentrated energy blast collided with the Zr'vash flagship's propulsion system, sending shockwaves rippling through the ship's hull. For a brief moment, everything seemed to stand still, the quiet before the storm. Then the flagship's engines erupted in a blinding explosion, the Zr'vash ship falling into a chaotic spiral. Direct hit, Richter confirmed, a trace of triumph in his voice. Their flagship is gone. The remaining Zr'vash ships, stunned and disoriented by the loss of their command vessel, faltered in their response. The Terrans had shattered their cohesion. Now, the Zr'vash were just another force in the galaxy, a force that had been dealt a blow they never saw coming. Adrian allowed himself a brief moment of relief, but it was fleeting. They weren't out of danger yet. The remaining Zr'vash ships were regrouping, preparing for one final assault. But they were no longer coordinated. They were disorganized. Weak. Push forward, Adrian said, his voice resolute. We finish this now. The Thunderclap surged toward the remaining Zr'vash fleet, the crew working in unison to fire shot after shot. The Zr'vash didn't stand a chance. Their ships, already crippled, couldn't withstand the relentless Terran assault. One by one, the enemy ships fell, either exploding in fiery bursts or drifting aimlessly through space, their power systems shattered. As the last Zr'vash ship went dark, a silence fell over the bridge. The battle was over. Adrian stood, his face a mask of stoic determination, though his heart raced with the adrenaline of victory. We've done it. The first battle is ours. Mira stood beside him, her face showing the faintest trace of a smile. We've sent them a message, Captain. Adrian's gaze drifted out of the viewport, where the debris of the battle floated like the remnants of a shattered empire. The Zr'vash were powerful, but they had been overconfident. They had underestimated humanity. This was just the beginning. The Thunderclap had shown the galaxy what humanity was capable of. And from this moment on, there would be no turning back. Let's get ready for the next fight, Adrian said. We've just started something they won't be able to stop.